Thank you very much, Patrick. So when I first started thinking about this talk, I was originally aiming to talk about the future, and realizing that I was put in a design and UX track, I figured I'd take the opportunity to interleave with that talk about the future, talking about the present and designing for the present of AR as it moves into becoming the future. So I'm going to start with a riddle. So the riddle is basically, there we go. What does designing for virtual reality have in common with designing for desktops, designing for non-working remote controls, smartphones, smartwatches? And my claim is absolutely nothing. Okay? And what do I mean by absolutely nothing? I actually mean something, and that's that all of those technologies have in common the fact that we were designing basically for a completely black screen, at least as black as our technology can make it. As you can see right now, courtesy of some strange hotel lighting, it's not particularly black. But the point is, as a designer, you're making the assumption that there's absolutely nothing there, and you have complete control over absolutely everything, which can be very empowering and very satisfying, and very restricted because we're working only with stuff that we control ourselves. Now, in contrast, in AR, there is a real world there. You know, whether it's a desk in which people are writing, whether it's a piece of equipment that might need to be maintained or repaired, whether it's a busy city in which there are people doing things and things doing things. And on top of this, we have no control over this stuff. In that busy city, we have people who might be going about their daily business. People are moving, things are moving, and they're not moving necessarily the way that we would like them to. And we need to take into account all of these things that are changing in the environment around us. So, what makes AR UIs different from all of the technologies I mentioned before? The user interface needs to respect the real world, needs to respond to it. It means that there's important things happening out there. For example, if you're crossing the street and you'd like to ensure that cars that come into your field of view are attended to by you, you shouldn't be overlaying on top of that the latest sports scores, for example. So your system needs to understand the environment, needs to understand the things that you can see, that you can hear, and otherwise experience. If I could have the, thank you for the slides. So, as an example of this is some work that my student Blaine Bell did with me back around the turn of the century. That sounds so strange to say. We like to refer to this as view management. And the idea is that if we have knowledge about the world, we can try to address it as the world actually changes. In this case, you're seeing a bunch of virtual buildings with labels. The labels actually attend to how much of the virtual buildings you see, so the labels can be unambiguously labeling particular buildings. But we're also attending to the head of Blaine Bell, my student over there. He is being tracked looking through an optical see-through display from Sony from many, many years ago. There's an agenda for a meeting that he's part of. There's a copy of one of the buildings off on the right. And these things basically are going to stay out of the way to make sure that the corridor between him and the viewer, whose view you're seeing right now, stays clear so we can make eye contact and talk with each other, which means that as either of us move, those relationships are maintained. So we're not going to see virtual stuff blocking us. Now, a lot of this has to do with field of view. This is extremely important. It's, for that matter, important with any technology. It's especially important with AR. And independent of the particular technology that you're using, you are, as a human being, endowed with some pretty amazing technology. If you look straight ahead, don't move your head, just physically keep your head and neck staring straight ahead. Don't move your eyes, keep your eyes staring straight ahead. You have roughly around 180, 190 degrees of horizontal field of view. You're not going to read anything that's out over here when you're looking straight ahead, but especially if something is moving off in your periphery, literally 180 and more degrees, you'll be able to attend to it and know that there is something happening over there. Very important evolutionarily speaking, perhaps to some great ancestor of yours surviving when something was trying to sneak up on them. In fact, that's just left eye, right eye by themselves, and both eyes working together. If you count only both eyes working together, you have around 120 degrees worth of horizontal stereo overlap, which is more than the horizontal field of view of pretty much any one of the major VR systems, let alone AR, that are on the market right now. So that's a lot of field of view. So let's talk a little bit more about field of view. So here we have our typical kind of magic lens, smartphone-based AR that's been around for quite a long time. We're looking at the world through essentially the bezel of a smartphone. We can see not only the bezel, we can see, of course, the logo of the manufacturer, some buttons. They're, in fact, taking up even less space than that is that little menu bar that's at the top over there, okay? And so since you can't get rid of the bezel, at least without changing the technology, and it's not going to happen that soon, okay, you basically have a built-in frame that you're holding in your hand, let alone your hand is participating as part of that frame. Now, if instead we have a head-worn display, especially one that doesn't have built into it clear demarcation as to where the display begins and the real world unaugmented begins, then if we put something on top of that, it looks kind of like this. We put a frame, very much like what you will see, in fact, in a lot of depictions that people will make of fanciful AR interfaces in the pages of magazines, both online and as well in paper. You're basically adding this extra thing that really doesn't help any. You're essentially putting a box, whatever shape it is, around the environment. So I'm going to claim that that kind of thing is really not something that we should be doing. Okay, unless we're really trying to celebrate the limitations of our augmented field of view, which is usually not something that you want to do. Now, you could argue, well, let's move it up to the top, right? You know, that's where menu bars live, that's where a taskbar might live. Now, the thing is, as we get wider and wider fields of view and higher fields of view, if you really are going to go and put this up at the very top of your field of view, you're going to have to strain to look up to actually see it, okay? So that doesn't make a lot of sense either. So I'm going to claim that's not something we want to do either. We want to actually put the user interface directly into the environment itself. So let me give you an example, talking a bit from something that's not AR, working our way through AR. And this is some work that my lab has done on orientation guidance for a very small field of view, monoscopic eyewear. Okay? In this case, all of you will probably recognize this as Google Glass. And we're seeing one of my students holding in his hand a physical object, not particularly big, and this system is going to tell him how to orient this from whatever orientation he's currently holding it in, the object actually is being tracked, to a desired orientation needed to perform some task, maybe looking for something, maybe getting ready to insert it into something for which it has to be properly oriented. If you look at the inset on the right over there, that is actually shot through with a camera directly through glass, okay? And the size of the field of view, actually, in glass is roughly this. If you hold your hand out, make a fist, full arm's length, that width is the width of the screen. Google Glass screen will literally overlay your fist put at the right position and orientation, okay? That's not a lot. You can see the hand of my student holding that object over there. And if we were trying to directly incorporate our user interface, showing us how to orient this thing, on top of that object, you're only going to augment a little teeny tiny piece of it. And so in this work, we actually are making the user interface be standalone, kind of like a picture in a classical manual, whether it's on paper or whether it's in something that's on some kind of a computer device. And so this is not actually integrated with the real world. So let me show you an example of what this looks like. And so here we're actually looking through glass. I'll explain what's going on over here in a second. Important thing is that little whitish looking squiggle in the center is literally a scaled down copy of the physical thing that he's holding in his hand. Because if we tried to overlay our graphics on top of that physical thing, we couldn't cover anything more than a little teeny tiny portion of it. We want to be able to actually show you those augmentations relative to all of it. So let me explain what's happening over there, and then I'm going to show you what happens when we go to AR. So this particular interaction technique designed to show you how to orient something is one that was one of a set of ones that we came up with and essentially did a user study to compare. This particular one involves two of what we'll call control icons, little handles, these little barber pole-like things that you're seeing that are sticking out of this representation of the object itself. And there's two stationary target icons, little rings, one over here, one over there. They always live in a horizontal line in the center, okay? They're always in front of the user, no matter what particular orientation task we're trying to perform. And what the user needs to do is to rotate the handles into the rings, matching the colors, blue to blue, red to red. And when they do this successfully, then the whole thing, the rings and the actual object, end up turning green, as you're seeing over there. There's some little arrows that you're seeing here that help guide you in. You can do this in any order you want to, red first, then blue, or blue first and then red, provided that when you're done, both are inside. And in fact, if you actually do them smoothly in the optimal way, with both going in at the same time, that in fact is that single optimal rotation that you might know that you can make to get from any given orientation to any desired orientation. There's exactly one axis about which you can orient yourself to make a single rotation to actually do that. Okay, so when I showed you over there, I'll show you again over here. This is the graphics that we actually put up on glass. The black is, because glass is optical see-through, is where you'll actually really see through to the world, and the brighter stuff in the center you're seeing through as well, but it's probably going to wash out a lot of what the world looks like. And so this is what this looks like as a person is actually trying to get those little barber poles into the rings. So let me contrast that with this. We have a version of this that runs instead on HoloLens, which has a larger field of view. It's stereoscopic as well. And what I'm going to show you is a little video in which now the UI is in the real world. We're back to doing AR over here. Instead of there being a separate copy of this object with the little barber poles sticking out of it, now you're actually seeing them and the additional augmentations in the context of the object being rotated. So this is tracked using Vuforia. We run this on HoloLens. To be fair, the video I'm going to show you was shot with a separate webcam. It's difficult to make HoloLens and Vuforia and the HoloLens camera record all at the same time. So let's see what this looks like. So again, now this is really AR, where we're registering those virtual objects with the real world itself. So that was one person doing something assisted by AR. So let's raise the ante a little bit, and we'll look at multiple people working together. So this is work that we've done in which we have a remote expert wearing a head-worn display, a local technician also wearing a head-worn display. The remote expert is basically instructing that local person how to do stuff, and they're doing this fully in 3D by essentially manipulating in 3D virtual copies of physical things that are in the world of the local technician. And what you're seeing here is right now a still seen through the eyes of the local technician. They're looking and in fact holding in their right hand, in this case, the top portion of an aircraft engine combustion chamber. The bottom part of that chamber is at the lower left, and the bright looking copy of that physical top is actually a virtual version of the top, which is being manipulated by the remote expert, who is in fact also talking, whose voice is really easy to do, with this local technician. So I'm going to start a little video. You're going to actually see that top on the left still being manipulated into place by the remote expert, and then you'll be seeing the local technician who is now trying to copy what they've done and position and orient the physical top correctly. And in fact, what we also have here are these little lines, essentially rubber band lines, that are going to assist, when you get rubber bands get to be straight, with orienting the physical top correctly relative to the physical bottom. So our expert is still positioning and orienting, and our technician now is getting ready to place the top on. And we're tracking all of these using, in this case, optical mocap technologies. So the system knows where the things are, and therefore can make sure that the augmentations you're seeing are basically positioned and oriented properly relative to stuff to instruct this person who is being helped by the remote expert to actually do things properly. So the last thing I'm going to mention, a bit more futuristic, okay, is going beyond simply having multiple people using AR and adding in other things in the environment. Much though I believe dearly in the future of AR, and particularly of the kinds of lightweight, small, large field of view, incredibly wonderful, good to look at, look through and look at eyewear, I don't think that means that everything else is going to go away. And so I think we're going to see eyewear working in consort with a variety of other technologies that just keep getting better and better. So in this case, you're going to see an example of a HoloLens through which we're going to be seeing this video playing, looking at a Microsoft Perceptive Pixel display, the forerunner of Surface Hub. And there's a leap motion controller that you might occasionally see at the very bottom, looking up so we can track multiple hands doing more complex things that we can do with HoloLens. This is a music exploration video. And so we're now basically using our hands to deal with multi-touch. There's Michael Jackson. We can see this little shaft of light above in which there's some albums. Let's try another one instead. So we hit Daft Punk. And there's some albums over there, little HoloLens action. And now we're doing with our two hands, we're manipulating this column using the leap motion controller. You can see the little HoloLens cursor dancing around in the center over there. And we can reach in, grab hold of an album, pull it around, scale it up,
play song.
Take advantage of audio over there, and now we go out to Spotify and we'll play a piece of the song that we're throwing up on that shelf over there. Okay, so lots of different things working together, multiple people, multiple kinds of technologies, okay, all together making things fun or making things useful in the environment. And so at this point, I'd like to acknowledge the many folks involved in the work that we do in my lab, the funding agencies that have supported it, and say thank you very much.